My name is Mint Harper. I'm 32 years old, a freelance financial consultant based in Seattle, Washington. 15 years ago, when I was just 17, my family walked away from me. They left nothing but a slip of paper on the kitchen counter with 7 cold words scrawled across it. You'll manage on your own. And I did. Those years that followed were some of the darkest I've ever known. Nights when I wasn't sure if I would eat. Days when the weight of silence pressed down harder than hunger itself. But through persistence, I carved a path forward. Today, I live in a modest apartment overlooking the Puget Sound, the kind of view I once only saw in postcards. I run a small but thriving consulting firm, built with my own hands, one client at a time. Success for me was never about luxury, it was about survival first, then dignity. For a while I thought the past was buried. But when a local radio station featured my story in an interview, everything changed. My family reappeared, not with apologies but with demands. Not with reconciliation but with threats. This is the story of how I faced them again, defended what I had built, and discovered what it truly means to create a family from the broken shards of a heart. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. Part 1: The Day They Left Me. I can still see that day as if it's been burned into my memory. It was autumn of 2010 in Tacoma, Washington. The kind of season when the air smells of wet leaves and the sidewalks are paved with golden rust. I was 17, walking home from my shift at a donut shop, my apron still dusted with sugar. My legs ached but I felt proud. In my pocket were $50 in tips. Money I planned to stretch for groceries and maybe a second-hand jacket before winter came. I opened the front door expecting the familiar clutter of our living room, the worn sofa with its sunken cushions, the flicker of the old TV, the hum of ordinary life. Instead, the house was hollow. No furniture. No noise. No smell of my mother's coffee or my father's grease-stained work boots. It was like walking into a shell that had been emptied overnight. There was no sign of my mother, Ruth, 50 years old, always muttering about spilled drinks, her voice a constant low tide in the house. No sign of my father, Carl, 52, a mechanic who shouted at the television whenever his favorite football team lost. No sign of my younger brother, Owen, 15, restless and loud, forever slamming his bedroom door to prove a point. All that remained was a single scrap of paper on the kitchen counter, written in blue ink. You'll manage on your own. I stood there with my bag of donuts, my pulse hammering in my ears, convinced at first it was a cruel joke. I called my mother's cell phone. A robotic voice told me the number was no longer in service. I raced upstairs to Owen's room. His mattress was stripped bare. Nothing but a rectangle of foam left behind. They were gone. Later, the landlord told me they had terminated the lease early and moved to Idaho, 2 states away, without leaving a forwarding address or a word of explanation. They had lifted themselves out of my life as neatly as furniture from an empty room, leaving me behind like something unwanted. I had 1 week to vacate the house. For the first 3 nights, I slept on friends' couches, embarrassed but pretending it was temporary. When those favors ran out, I used what little savings I had to rent a storage unit on the edge of town. It was meant for boxes and old furniture, but I made it my refuge. At night, I unrolled a thin blanket on the concrete floor and lay down between stacks of cardboard, listening to the echo of my own breathing. I showered at the public gym with a prepaid day pass, scraping together quarters for a locker. I ate peanut butter from the jar with a plastic spoon and used the library computers to search for jobs. By day, I smiled, nodded, and lied, telling anyone who asked that everything was fine. By night, I curled into myself and cried, unable to understand what crime I had committed to deserve being abandoned. One night, long after midnight, I was startled awake by a crash. The metal roll-up door rattled like thunder. A group of teenagers had broken into the storage complex, their laughter sharp and cruel as they vandalized units nearby. Through the thin wall, I heard the smash of glass, the clang of metal. My heart pounded so hard I thought they'd hear it. I crouched in the corner clutching a rusted iron bar I'd found near the loading dock, ready to swing if I had to, but they didn't find me. Eventually their noise receded into the dark, leaving me trembling in silence. That night, something inside me shifted. Sitting there on the cold floor, the taste of fear metallic in my mouth, I realized no one was coming to save me. If I wanted to survive, it would be up to me. The paper my family left had been more than a note, it was a sentence. But it was also, I began to understand, a challenge. Part 2: The Climb. My first foothold back into the world came through a night shift job at a cafe in downtown Seattle. It wasn't glamorous, sticky counters, endless pots of coffee, and customers who grew meaner the later the hour, but it was mine. The manager, Diane, a 45-year-old former soldier, was the kind of woman who carried herself like she still wore a uniform. She was strict but fair, and she agreed to pay me in cash since I didn't yet have new identification papers. One night, after a double shift and 2 bus transfers, my body finally gave out. I collapsed behind the counter. When I woke up, Diane was sitting nearby, her expression stern but softened by something I hadn't seen before: concern. She didn't scold me. Instead, she let me sleep in the break room and handed me a hamburger wrapped in foil. That small gesture, a bed made of couch cushions, a meal I hadn't earned, was the first time I felt true kindness from a stranger. From there, I began piecing together a plan. I devoured free financial tutorials on YouTube, pausing and rewinding until concepts like budgeting and compound interest made sense. I saved every dollar I could, living on little more than black coffee and peanut butter sandwiches, and bought a prepaid phone so I could apply for better jobs. The first year, I moved through life like a ghost. Invisible, exhausted, always one mistake away from falling apart. But I didn't quit. One of our regular customers was Henry, a retired accountant in his 60s with silver hair, and the kind of patience that only comes from years of balancing other people's books. He noticed how I hustled, how I never wasted a minute. One evening, he leaned across the counter and asked if I'd be interested in a temporary job, helping him sort through a mountain of office records for a client. The pay was triple what I made serving coffee. I said yes without hesitation. That was my break. I showed up early, stayed late, and asked questions until the numbers stopped being abstract and started to feel like a language I could speak. Henry became an informal mentor, someone who believed in my mind when no one else had cared. By 22, I had enough skill and confidence to start freelancing as a financial consultant. By 25, I launched my own company, Harper Solutions, working off a folding table with a borrowed laptop. The climb wasn't smooth, but I kept pushing. By 30, Harper Solutions had 10 employees and a modest office downtown. My client list included companies I once only dreamed of approaching. And at 32 last year, I crossed a milestone I never thought possible. I became a millionaire. Not in the performative social media sense, but in the practical one: 7 figures in savings, a paid-off condo overlooking the city, and health insurance I didn't have to fear losing. The first time I saw my bank balance cross into that territory, I sat alone in my apartment and cried. Not tears of joy exactly, but of memory. I cried for the girl who had eaten peanut butter in the dark, who had showered at the gym and slept on concrete floors. She had made it here against every odd. But success brings shadows. As Harper Solutions grew, I received a call one evening from a blocked number. The voice on the other end claimed to be a friend of my father's. He said he knew my past, that I was the girl who'd been abandoned, and threatened to expose me publicly unless I paid him to keep quiet. For weeks I barely slept. Old fears crept back, reminding me of that storage unit and the terror of being cornered. But this time I refused to bend. I hired a private investigator, who traced the call to a scam artist with no connection to my family at all. That revelation changed me. It proved what I had long suspected. Fear is a weapon people use to control you. Once I saw it clearly, I promised myself I would never again hand over power to anyone who tried to exploit my past. I had built this life with my own 2 hands, and I intended to keep it. Part 3: When my family came back. For 15 years my family never called, never wrote, never even sent a birthday card. The silence became its own kind of answer. I only knew pieces of their lives from what the internet revealed. Sometimes, late at night, I'd find myself scrolling through photos of Owen on social media. He was 30 now, a certified auto repair technician in Boise, Idaho, Married to a nurse named June 29, with a 4-year-old daughter named Lily. In the snapshots he posted, he looked happy. Grease on his hands, a toddler perched on his shoulders. I wondered if he ever told June about me, or if my name stayed buried like an old debt no one wanted to mention. Then, without warning, my own story slipped into their world. A local radio program had invited me to speak about overcoming adversity. I expected a small audience, commuters catching the end of a segment on their drive home. Instead, the interview went viral. Within a week, 2 million people had listened. My inbox overflowed with messages of support from strangers, mentors, even potential clients. For a few days I floated on a strange, quiet pride, until the email arrived. Its subject line stopped my heart. "You're still my daughter." It was from Ruth, my mother. There was no apology inside, only a few clipped sentences about how she'd like to hear my story, and maybe meet again. Minutes later, another message popped up. This one from Owen. "We miss you. Can we fix this?" I closed my laptop so hard the screen flickered. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. 15 years of silence, broken not by remorse but by entitlement. Like someone knocking on the door of a house they had already burned down. I booked an appointment with my therapist, Sarah, a 40-year-old trauma specialist who had been helping me untangle the knots my family left behind. She listened as I read the emails aloud, her expression steady but concerned. She told me to give myself a week before responding to let my nervous system settle. "This is about your safety," she said. "You don't owe them an answer until you're ready." I tried to follow her advice. I buried myself in work, doubled my gym sessions, scheduled dinners with friends. But the emails sat in my mind like stones at the bottom of a pond. I dreamed about my mother's handwriting. I woke up tasting metal, as if the past were already in my mouth. 10 days later I wrote back to Owen. My hands shook over the keyboard. 15 years, I typed. "What's changed?" His reply came within an hour. He said the radio interview had shaken him. He said he'd been only 15 when they left me, that he had no choice, that he'd looked for me online but never had the courage to reach out. I wanted to believe him, but another voice in me whispered, if he truly cared, why wait until I was successful to speak? Then a package arrived at my office with no return address. Inside was a necklace I'd worn as a child, cheap silver, the clasp still bent from the last time I'd fumbled it, and a scrap of paper scrawled with the words, "We're family. Don't forget." My stomach lurched. It felt like someone had been watching me, gathering pieces of my life from a distance. I called the police. They dusted for prints but found none. No leads, no answers. I installed security cameras at home and at the office, the whir of their motion sensors becoming a new soundtrack to my evenings. Part 4. Escalation. Soon after, Owen began to reveal more of the picture. He said the family was in financial trouble. My father's auto repair business had failed. My mother's health was deteriorating. June was pregnant with their second child. I felt my stomach knot again. All the puzzle pieces rearranged themselves into something I didn't want to see. They didn't just want contact. They wanted money. My mother sent another email, this one filled with scanned photographs of our old family life. Birthday cakes, Christmas mornings, 1,000 fake smiles from the years before abandonment. At the bottom she'd written, "We were wrong. Let us make it up to you." I showed the messages to Sarah at my next appointment. She reminded me, gently but firmly, that I had the right to set boundaries. "Forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation," she said. "And reconciliation is not an obligation." Still, I agreed to meet Owen. Part of me wanted answers, part of me wanted proof. We chose a neutral spot, a cafe in Portland, Oregon, halfway between Seattle and Boise. When I walked in, he was already there. We were both in our 30s now, me 32, him 30, but he looked older. His hair had thinned, and his eyes carried a tension I remembered from our childhood but sharper now, like a blade kept in a drawer too long. We started with weather, as if small talk could erase a decade and a half. Then his voice cracked. "Mint," he said. "I'm sorry." His hands trembled around his coffee cup. "I didn't know they planned to leave you until the car was already moving." The question that had haunted me for 15 years escaped before I could stop it. "Why me?" He stared at the table. He said they thought I was strong, that I would manage, that they had to focus on him. I told him about the storage unit, about peanut butter on a plastic spoon, about crying myself to sleep, convinced I'd done something unforgivable. He broke down. He said they'd told him I'd chosen to stay with friends, that it had been my decision. It was all a lie. I don't know what I expected, closure maybe, or at least a crack of truth, but the air between us felt heavier than before. Then, as if scripted by some cruel playwright, a man I didn't recognize approached our table. He said he was a friend of my father's and tried to take a photo of me on his phone. My pulse spiked. I stood up so fast my chair clattered to the floor. I shoved his hand away and rushed toward the door. Behind me, Owen called my name, swore he didn't know the man. But in that moment, all I could feel was the old fear flooding back. The storage unit, the teenagers, the rusted iron bar in my hands. By the time I reached my car, my breath was coming in gasps. I glanced over my shoulder. Owen was running after me, his expression a mask of worry. But I couldn't tell if it was worry for me or worry about being caught. That incident cemented something in me. Whatever their motives, guilt, desperation, manipulation, I couldn't risk being pulled back into the vortex I had barely escaped. I had built a life brick by brick. Now it was time to decide how far I'd go to protect it. Part 5. Confrontation and Truth. The pressure didn't ease. If anything, it grew sharper, more deliberate. My phone buzzed with threatening texts from numbers I didn't recognize. Sometimes they were cryptic, sometimes explicit. One morning, I opened an envelope slipped under my office door and found a photograph of Lily, my niece, playing in June's backyard. On the back, scrawled in uneven ink, were the words, "This isn't over." That was the moment I realized it wasn't just me they were after. They were willing to use a child. I spoke to Owen and June immediately. Their faces went pale. Together, we filed for a restraining order in Seattle. The hearing was held in a cramped courtroom, the kind that smells faintly of old paper and dust. My parents sat across from me, their postures rigid, their expressions carefully arranged. When the judge asked them directly about the threats, they denied everything. They insisted they only wanted to repair the family. But the mask slipped when the subject of abandonment came up. My father stammered, unable to find words. My mother dissolved into tears, the kind of tears that begged for sympathy rather than offered truth. The judge wasn't fooled. He signed the order: 3 years, no contact, no proximity. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of safety. It didn't last. Within weeks, Owen's house was broken into. Photographs, documents, and keepsakes vanished, but nothing of monetary value was taken. On the kitchen table, a slip of paper remained. Family business stays in the family. I knew whose handwriting it was. One night, leaving my office long after dark, I spotted a car idling near my apartment complex. My chest tightened when I recognized the make, the dented fender, the way the driver's silhouette leaned forward against the wheel. My father. He didn't move, didn't get out, just stared up at my building as if memorizing the windows. I raised my phone, snapped a photo, and sent it to James, my attorney. James, a 45-year-old specialist in family disputes, called me back almost immediately. His tone was calm but edged with worry. "This proves presence," he said, "but not intent. It's not enough to hold him. Stay cautious, Mint. Very cautious." I tried to. I changed my routines, varied my routes home, double-checked my locks. But fear has a way of finding you, no matter how careful you are. One evening, walking down a nearly empty street, I heard the roar of an engine. Headlights flared. A car swerved onto the sidewalk, bearing down on me. I leapt to the side, scraping my palms on the pavement. The vehicle screeched past, missing me by inches, before disappearing into the night. My heart hammered as I staggered to my feet. I caught just enough of a glimpse to know it was my father's car. The police took my report, but without camera footage or witnesses, there was little they could do. "Be careful," they said, as if care alone could shield me from someone willing to kill. That night, sitting on my couch with my knees pulled to my chest, I realized something chilling. They weren't simply trying to scare me. They were testing how far I'd go, how much I'd endure before I gave in. And if intimidation failed, they were willing to escalate. Part 6. Family Secrets. The next crack in the facade didn't come from my parents. It came from June. She arrived at my office one rainy afternoon with Lily balanced on her hip, cheeks flushed from the cold. She asked if we could talk privately. I led her into the conference room, my pulse racing. She didn't waste time. Mint, you need to know what they've been saying about you. Her words spilled out heavy and fast. My parents had spun a web of lies that stretched across years. They told neighbors, coworkers, even extended family that I had run away, stolen money, and struggled with mental instability. They painted themselves as victims of a reckless daughter. They even claimed to have hired private investigators to search for me. An elaborate ruse to cover up the truth of abandonment. I sat frozen, the air thick in my lungs. I didn't know, June whispered. Not until your radio interview. That's when I confronted Owen. He admitted the truth. He broke down. She placed her free hand over Lily's back and looked at me with eyes full of apology. I want my daughter to know you, Mint, but only if you want that. I won't force it. I thought of all those years I doubted myself, replaying their departure like a broken record. The lies explained everything, the whispers, the silence, the way distant relatives never reached out. I hadn't been erased accidentally. I'd been erased deliberately. June showed me screenshots of my mother's old social media posts. Pleas for prayers, claims of a lost daughter gone astray. Each one crafted to win sympathy. Each one calculated to bury the truth. It felt like betrayal all over again, but also like clarity. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't deserved it. I wasn't the guilty one. Then June leaned closer, her voice low. There's more. She told me my mother had pressured Owen for years to cut all ties with me. She threatened to disown him if he ever reached out. June slipped a folded letter across the table. I opened it carefully. The paper was yellowed, creased at the edges. It was a letter Owen had written to me years ago but never sent. His handwriting was shaky but sincere. He apologized, admitted his fear, confessed that he was under our parents' control. Tears blurred the words, but I read every line. For the first time, I understood that Owen wasn't simply complicit. He was trapped too. I looked up at June, who was holding Lily close, her eyes brimming. In that moment, something shifted. My parents had built a fortress of lies, but cracks were spreading. And through one of those cracks, a fragile truth had reached me. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving their cruelty. I was beginning to see their power unravel. Part 7, the final confrontation. I decided it was time to face my parents one last time. No more hiding, no more letting them control the narrative. I wrote a short, sharp email. I know you're watching. Meet me tomorrow at noon, Pine Street Cafe. After that, leave us alone forever. They agreed. I arrived early, choosing a corner table where I could see the door. My hands tightened around the coffee cup, trying to anchor myself in the warmth. When they walked in, I barely recognized them. Age had dulled their edges, but not their choices. They looked tired, even fragile, but I felt nothing except clarity. This isn't reconciliation, I said before they could speak. And it's not about money. You've already lost me. You've lost Owen. You've lost Lily. If you keep harassing us, I'll make everything public. Every message, every photo, every truth about what you did when I was 17. I laid out the folder I had brought, filled with evidence. My mother's tears started almost instantly. She mumbled that all she wanted was family again. My father's face hardened instead. His voice was sharp, accusing me of being ungrateful. Ungrateful, I said, my tone icy. For being abandoned? For being stalked? You don't get to rewrite what happened. You don't get to call yourselves parents. I stood calm and firm, then walked away. I didn't look back. The air outside felt lighter, as if I'd finally stepped out of a cage I didn't know I'd still been in. That night, I called Owen and told him everything. He was angry I had gone alone, but his relief was clear in his voice. For the first time, we both felt that the past didn't own us anymore. Part 8. Rebuilding family. After that meeting, my parents fell silent. No more emails. No more late-night cars outside my apartment. Just silence. Owen and June made a bold move. They relocated to Seattle. They bought a small house just 15 minutes from my apartment. We began a new tradition. Sunday dinners. Around the table, we created memories that felt real and safe. Lily called me Aunt Mint. And each time I heard it, my chest tightened with a mixture of gratitude and grief. I still saw Sarah every week. Healing wasn't a straight line. The old nightmares lingered. But each session gave me more tools to steady myself, to remind me that scars don't erase worth. A year later, a letter arrived. It wasn't sent directly but through James, my lawyer. My mother had written it. She admitted what they had done, said they were now in therapy, and promised to respect my boundaries. I didn't respond. I didn't forgive. But I kept the letter, not as a bridge but as a reminder. Forgiveness is not obligation. Family is not automatic. At Lily's 5th birthday, my apartment overflowed with balloons, cake, and laughter. Watching Owen push Lily on a swing while June snapped photos, I felt a quiet peace. I had survived. I had built something new. I had managed. Not in the way they had once told me I could, but in the way I chose. 3 lessons I learned. 1. Boundaries are a form of love for yourself. Saying no doesn't make you cruel. It makes you whole. 2. Family can be chosen. Blood ties don't define love, loyalty, or safety. You have the right to create your own circle. 3. Healing is slow but real. Scars remain, but they don't have to control the future. With patience and courage, you can rewrite the story. This is my story. From a girl abandoned at 17 to a woman who defined her own life. If you found hope, strength, or inspiration in these words, I invite you to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Together, we can build a community that lifts each other from the shadows into the light. Because no matter where you come from, you deserve to create the family and the future you choose.